Okay, check it out. So it's like 1:45 in the morning and I'm still editing this video and I thought it would be done by now, but I'm still editing it. But anyway, the main thing about this video is once a year I like to buy pumpkins and I don't sound very enthusiastic during the video and I apologize for that, but that's just the way it's got to be because I don't like working on videos forever and it's just that's what it is, okay? So, without further ado, here is the intro thing to a video that I made like 2 years ago, and I haven't updated the intro at all. And we're gonna talk about pumpkins. Alright.
Every year around fall, pumpkins come out, and I always try to do the same thing, is I try to use as many different pumpkin recipes as I can. And the very first thing to begin with for a pumpkin recipe is definitely the pumpkin, and you want to start by cutting it from stem to end, cracking it in half. Sometimes a knife can be a little bit tricky, but once you have it cut in half, you just crack it open and then hollow it out. I actually did debate with myself for a while, whether or not I was going to do the roasted pumpkin seeds, but eventually I decided, no, I'm not going to do those this time. I know a lot of people like roasted pumpkin seeds, but honestly, I'm not even sure if I do. And I was already doing like 3 recipes and whatever. It's a lot easier to empty these out, by the way, if you use a spoon, like a smart person would have started out with, instead of just your hand, but like I said, they only come out once a year, and I often forget. So the first thing that we're doing with the pumpkin recipe is making a pumpkin puree, and to do that you need to actually oil the inside of these pumpkins really nice. You preheat your oven to 325 degrees, preferably before you start covering your hands in oil, but you could do it like me too. You're supposed to put them in the oven right here and put some tin foil on top. It would have been smarter if I put the tin foil on top first, which, like you see here, that's what I'm doing. But you can also burn the tops of your hands. It's up to you. After about an hour at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, you want to get them out. Fun fact, these little pot holders that I'm using are not actually pot holders, and I end up burning my hands some more. But that's fine, we're just going to use a fork and scrape out the insides of this pumpkin. Using a fork for this is pretty smart. And honestly, if the tinfoil was on a little bit better, the sides would have been easier to scrape, but after a little bit of elbow grease, I got it going. Now, the thing about pumpkin puree, right, is that it's made out of pumpkin. It's orange, and you place it in this bag here. I like to study the bag inside of the stock pot that I'm going to use a little bit later on. It keeps it from spilling everywhere, and if it does fall out of the bag, it's already in the pot, and honestly, we were going to use the pot for it anyway. Make sure to get all of that good part. Sometimes there'll be some little stringy bits, you just want to ignore those if they were from like the pumpkin guts, but eventually you do start just getting to the skin of the pumpkin. You just want to get as much of that pumpkin pulp as possible. Now, a can of pumpkin puree, you could go the can route if you want, but the fresh pumpkin always tastes a little bit better to me, and it's pretty cost productive. It's like a can has about a cup or two, and it's like $2, whereas an entire pumpkin will yield about the same amount, like per pound, as the cans. I don't know. The main thing is we have our own pumpkin puree. It's good. As for the pumpkin soup, you definitely want to start off with about 6 cups of chicken broth. Now, the neat thing about chicken broth is all the boxes seem to come in 4 cups per box. So you just want to measure out the remaining 2 cups inside this measuring cup here and finish pouring that in. It would have actually been a lot smarter to put in the pumpkin first because it sort of splashes, and I apologize and I'll clean it up later. But you want to get your 4 cups of pumpkin puree. Here's where you start getting interesting. You chop up an onion. You'll notice a couple of cuts here, pun intended. The cuts are actually because onions make me cry, but that's fine. Just chop them up as finely as you can, and it doesn't matter if they're too fine or not because it's gonna all go in a blender later on. So just, try your best, minimize work, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect, and all in all, nothing in life is perfect. Toss those into the pot, and moving on to the next thing. I like to add a little bit of thyme to everything, and thyme is a very important ingredient in life in general. But also, let's go ahead and add some minced garlic. Minced garlic is always good. And don't forget, I will have all of these ingredients listed in the little thing at the bottom. Some crushed black peppercorn inside the pot. You want to stir that up and bring it to a boil. Sorry about that little focusing issue. I actually decided to double up the recipe. Um, you don't have to, but I realized that I was going to be serving quite a few people. So you just want to let that get all steamy, start boiling. And once it hits a boil, you just want to let it simmer for about 30 minutes. I don't remember if this is. Yep, so boiling, you want to turn it down to a simmer and let it simmer for 30 minutes. You'll notice a lot of the pumpkin guts are still in there, not the pumpkin guts, but the pumpkin puree. But that's to be expected when you're making homemade pumpkin soup. It's around this time, once after it's been simmering for another 30 minutes, to just kind of toss everything into a blender about 1 cup at a time. The main idea is to turn all of these chunks into pure liquid, and they do blend really fast and really easily, and I'm not sure if that's because of the ingredient itself or the fact, it's hot. I notice that blenders tend to work better when the liquids are hot. Once it's all blended and placed back in there, you just want to bring it back to a boil and let it simmer for another 30 minutes. Or if you're like me, just let it simmer for a little bit longer. You can never have it too good. Anyway, moving on from this, right about okay. I guess we're still simmering it. That's cool. There's a lot of different things that you can make with pumpkin, but probably the most generic is pumpkin pie, and I like to start my pie dough with a little bit of flour and a little bit of margarine. I like to use that country crock Marge Simpson, just make some pie dough. Cooking is really therapeutic, I believe. It really helps you with your anger issues. Uh, One of my anger issues, unfortunately, comes from cooking, and it's the fact that I can never figure out the exact ratio of flour to margarine, and I end up just going back and forth on it over and over. But that's neither here nor there. Add a little bit of ice water, and that will help hold it all together and turn it into a nice dough. There it is. A nice doughy texture for your pie dough is really what you're looking for. Go ahead and knead that on your cutting board because you're working on tiles and you don't want it to get on all of the grout. Just kind of knead it and punch it and just do all sorts of things. Knock your camera back a little bit, Brian. That's really smart. Roll that out with a rolling pin, and there's a couple of different ways that you can make a pie. Most people will use a pie tin, but I thought it would be neat this time to use muffin tins. And the interesting thing about muffin tins is I didn't think about doing it until after I rolled out the pie dough. But, all in all, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Get all your pie dough nice and flat, cut it into like 6 little bits, roll them a little bit flatter, place them in your well-greased muffin holes, and we're off to a good start. The important thing is that they're all nice and flat. We place them in there, and it's going to be good. You may remember these pie dough recipes. They actually seem to be the things I do most in this cooking show. I made those apple pies once when I had depression. I made those meat pies once when like a robot doppelganger, I think, invaded my home and I had to escape with a spaceship. Then I ate a spaghetti man. Pretty sure I was in a coma or something. I don't think any of that is real. Uh, but yeah, I like to cut away the crust on the outside and just make it look nice. This margarine and flour pie dough recipe you can actually save in the freezer for a good like 3 to 4 months. You know, if you want to. I didn't have a whole lot of room in my freezer, so I did actually end up throwing it out, which was probably a waste, but you know, you can't be perfect. So you take that pumpkin puree that you made earlier and you add a cup of condensed milk, which I always think is gross, and some people don't think it's gross, but I think it's gross. Just it's just thicker than I expect it to be, and it's always like less white than I would hope it would be. Add to that 2 large eggs. Eggs are an important ingredient, and unfortunately, they're not vegan, but I believe you might be able to find a substitute. I think applesauce, perhaps. Uh, we use some ground ginger, some ground nutmeg. I think I put those in the wrong order, but whatever. And cinnamon. Cinnamon is very delicious. You want to mix that up as well as you can. You want it to be even more soupy than the soup, but honestly, I don't know what happened this time, but it didn't turn out as soupy as I wanted it to. Cooking is more an art than a science, so sometimes you just gotta go with the flow and flow it into those well-greased muffin holes. I made 6 pumpkin pies today, and I think that's pretty good. Um, yeah, just kind of try to evenly distribute all of the liquids, kind of flatten them out. Normally, pumpkin pie is a lot more liquidy than this, but that's fine. We want to place them in the oven at 425 degrees for about 15 minutes or so, but then after that you want to lower the temperature to 350 degrees and then cook them for another 35 to 40 minutes. Here you can see me kind of fiddling with the timers, and yeah, I know how to oven. After that, you just kind of want to take your oven mitt, the actual real one, pull the little pumpkin pies out. I think they turned out pretty good. They are cracked on the top, but like I said, it's more an art than a science. Sometimes, I like to drink when no one's looking and just kind of drink an entire bottle of wine while I'm cooking. Um, yeah. Here's the cream of the crop. Um, if you were just using the regular recipe that I was showing earlier instead of doubling it, you only want to add about 1 cup of heavy cream. But like I said earlier, I did double up the ingredients, so here we are with 2 cups of heavy cream. You just kind of want to mix that up. And then my secret ingredient, here, you're to my side. Why don't you rinse that out? That's terrific that you're in my shot. I like to add cinnamon into my pumpkin soup, and it's not a lot of people do this, but I like to give it a little bit of a pumpkin pie flavor. You know, just kind of stir that in and just add cinnamon to taste. I believe that's my secret ingredient. Cinnamon cinnamon is just so good and delicious. Kind of stir that in slowly. Great. Okay. We're moving on? No, we're still stirring. Okay. So the neat thing about drinking, right? Drinking and cooking is sometimes people will just naturally take over and you just kind of have to go with the flow. Sometimes you're at your family's house when you're cooking and it's great because they'll take over and they'll start serving and they won't even mind you filming them. It's it's terrific. Look at her go. So we ended up serving our pumpkin soup with a side of cornbread, which was fantastic and inspired. I would not have thought to do this if they didn't just take over the kitchen while I was in the middle of filming this. Everybody gets their own slice of cornbread, everybody gets their own individual pumpkin pie, and everybody gets a bowl of pumpkin soup. And there are so many plates and bowls here, you would be amazed. Like, we were only serving 5 people, but it looks like so much more. The important thing is that all the pumpkin pies came right out of the muffin tin. The pumpkin soup went so easily into the bowl, and the cornbread went so well with all of it. Yes, sir. Hey, smile for the camera. There you are. Alright. So we got our pumpkin pie, our pumpkin soup, our cornbread. They're very nice together. It's a little glitchy, but that's fine. I like to serve my pumpkin pie with Ready Whip.
So much. You want to do mine?
Not ever. Oh.
That's
Keep going.
ready? No?
Keep it going.
I'll do myself.
I didn't mind.
Oh, you got it.
I didn't mind.
Upside down. Oh, damn, you got it. That's the perfect look it is. This is perfect.
Oh, it's so good. We're gonna add more to mine.
Oh, geez.
Can I add more to mine?
Nah.